Welcome everyone to today's open dialogue webinar session. We've got Sylvain Seguin and Zakari Krieger here from Fixed Network Canada and Prime CarCare respectively. We're going to be talking about the shop of the future, a lot about diversifying services so you can withstand the current market, offsetting your losses, and whether that's possible with adding different services like glass, mechanical, mixing up what you offer at your store, and also what that ties into customer service wise, the investment aspect. We know everyone's wanting to talk about that as well. Any pitfalls that Zakari and Sylvain have seen in their experience of introducing new services. So got almost 40 people in here already. So welcome everyone. I'll kick off with a survey just to see where everyone's tuning in from today. Give me 1 second. Polls and quizzes. Let us know where you're tuning in from today. Hopefully we've got representation from across Canada. I know we have some international folks that like to attend as well. Oh, and it looks like we do. We've got a good mix. Lots from Ontario. We've got lots from Quebec as well. Some Saskatchewaners, some Manitobans. Albertans are in here as well. We've got some of the West Coast represented. So good morning to everyone out on the West if it's still the morning for you guys, Wednesday morning. So welcome. Thanks for attending today and being part of the conversation. Basically, how this session is going to run, we're going to start with a little introduction if you don't know Sylvain or Zakari, and then we'll dive in to speak about some of the key opportunities from their perspective, the revenue streams that they've seen work for collision centers and automotive businesses, and then we'll talk about biggest challenges. Like I said, we're going to touch on the investment aspect, the customer service aspect, and any potential pitfalls that can be encountered when you're diversifying your services. So we'll end with a Q&A. So feel free to submit your questions throughout the session. We'll get to them at the end, and Sylvain and Zakari will answer all your questions. But we'll be on here for about the next hour until 3 o'clock Eastern time, until noon for everyone on the West Coast. And let's just kick it off because we've got about 50 people here. Tell your friend we're still climbing. So sorry if we're gonna get started before some of you guys get to join, but we'll just kick it off with some intros here. I'll end the poll. Nice to see we've got everyone from across Canada here. Like I said, Shop of the Future. This is the topic we're talking about today. We've got Sylvain Seguin, he's the president of Fixed Network Canada here with us. And then we've got Zakari Krieger, who is the vice president of Prime CarCare, who's going to speak on his experience as well. Before we kick things off, we'll start with Sylvain and then pass it over to you, Zach. But Sylvain, could you walk us through your time in the industry? We actually just had the opportunity to speak to you about your time in the industry. So we know you've been around for a lot of different roles, and tell us about what you do with Fixed Network and kind of just how you've operated throughout the industry.
Been around long enough to have a lot of gray hair, but thank you, Allison. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, I've been in the industry for, my God, I stopped counting right now. But as some of you may know, I was a technician by trade. I was recruited by a paint manufacturer that I worked for 15 years that went through many programs with them to a point that at the end I was actually managing Axon Nobel, basically, not to name them, for the Canadian market. This is how I met with Mr. Leal. Him and I shared a passion for obviously the collision industry and the aftermarket industry. And here I am today after it's been 6 years. So basically 15 years as a technician, 15 years at Axon Nobel, and 6 years here, so you can do the count. And happy to be here today.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Happy to have your expertise on our little panel here today. And Zakari, tell us about your experience in the industry. I know you came from a family business, so tell us about your climb and how you joined the company with Prime CarCare.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born into the industry. So my great grandfather had started an automotive parts company in Hamilton, Ontario, Barton Auto Parts, and it was one of the original jobbing businesses in Canada, and went from my great grandfather, my grandfather, to my father, and I was finishing up university, and we needed help in the business, so I finished university and I joined the business, and I spent over a decade, in that business, running the business, eventually buying the business. Did my MBA, finished my MBA, and sold the business. and happy to join the Fix network in the position where I'm able to now manage our Prime CarCare business, which is our Canadian automotive retail business. So I manage our mechanical business across Canada, automotive and franchise, corporate and franchise, and our glass business, corporate and franchise as well. So, and I've been here just over a year now, and enjoying myself and having lots of fun, and yeah, happy to be here today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for bringing your expertise as well. We've got pretty much all bases covered, it seems like right now. So let's just dive right into things. So like I said, we're talking about diversifying revenue streams, mostly via mechanical and glass services. We want to talk about the key opportunities here. Before we can do that, we have to touch on the different changes that are happening right now in the industry. There's a lot going on in terms of obviously vehicle technology, consumer behavior, and especially when you look at the factors of cost, customer loyalty in the customer service realm. But on top of all of that, what do you two see as the biggest challenges currently impacting the collision repair business, the automotive business dynamic today? And how is that going to impact them in the future if they don't do anything to address these challenges? Sylvain, do you want to start off?
I'll start. Thank you. Well, first of all, with the massive and rapid change of technology, we don't go to business today the same way as we used to, specifically in the collision industry. So today, when you hear about people greenfield, or the first thing they think about is that you don't talk about collision anymore. You talk about, first of all, collision and calibration. Because today, specifically now, we fix about 80% of the cars we fix requires calibration. It's a different mindset a little bit. Some are using a sublet basically, and subletting all the calibration away, which is fine. Not everybody has room to set up for calibration, but next year and moving forward, 100% of the cars we're going to be fixing will require calibration. So it's imperative that when you talk about collision, you think about how you're going to be able to calibrate those vehicles moving forward. A little bit the same on the glass side, but I'll let Zach touch to that. But and on top of it, now with new technology, we believe, and I think we're seeing it right now in the Canadian landscape, is that the frequency of accident will start slowing down based on that new technology. So you need to make sure that you maximize all your revenue on every vehicle you touch that comes into your facility, which is why a couple of years ago, Steve basically invested and made sure that every opportunity that you can touch, you can look at every aspect from glass, mechanical, and of course, calibration for me, it's when we talk about the shop of the future, we talk about those four elements. So that's my take on it.
Absolutely. And Zachary, on your side, the glass mechanical, what are the challenges you're seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start, I guess, on the challenges looking at the broader, call it automotive mechanical side of the market. Having the experience running banner programs with the parts stores and seeing different mechanical garages in their evolution over the last decade. No one was thinking about electric vehicles 10 years ago. No one was thinking about calibration. No one was thinking about the different dynamics of integrating, calibration, alignment, and so on and so forth. So, I think as we've seen this natural evolution of, the changes in vehicle technology, call it, changes in advanced, driver technology and so on and so forth, it's having a natural evolution that the services are beginning to change. So for the mechanical centers, I think that there's a slow evolution that, they're not going to see oil changes as much with much less frequency. The services are changing, that there's less locomotive parts, there's less internal combustion parts. And regardless if we're going to be able to hit 2035 government that 100% of vehicles are going to be electric by that point, it doesn't matter. There is a slow natural evolution that the mechanical aftermarket shop needs to consider. How do they change their service makeup, and how are they protecting the revenue streams moving forward, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge that I have seen over a period of time. And leading into it, we talk about glass and we talk about calibration. It's really exciting what Steve has invested into with our glass program today, because we're able, on my side of the business, we're able to say, hey, we have the knowledge, we have vertical distribution, we have all of these different facets to get guys into, into the glass and calibration business and get them effective in diversifying their business, for call it, like we talked about, that shop of the future. So and we could talk we're going to talk a little bit about that as we continue to move forward, but again, natural evolution, as we've talked about, with different, with services changing and the market changing. So
As Sylvain pointed out, when you guys talk about these shops of the future, that's the idea. So, ADAS is really at the forefront of that. And collision, you can't say collision without ADAS because of those stats that Sylvain mentioned of just how many vehicles today on the road have some form of ADAS. So I think we'll get with the big question that I know everyone on the line is wondering, because we said we're going to talk about how you can offset losses. So we'll start with Zak here, but we're cutting to the chase. Can automotive businesses, by adding potential new services, mechanical glass or any other services from your experience, have you seen it work where they've added services and we're able to then offset losses? So we'll start with Zak, and then Sylvain, you can share your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sylvain and I always talk about this, that there's a differentiation between eliminating sublet services within a collision shop and taking on a component of retail with service diversification, right? So in terms of that component with eliminating sublet services, and I'll let Sylvain speak to that point, further, what we see is it helps increase the productivity within that collision repair shop. But again, a very different methodology from adding retail services. But 100%, it is effective. It is profitable to diversify and to add services. But there's a lot of different components to consider when you are doing that, to add a retail and diversified component to your business, whether it be staffing, space requirements, investment, time, so on and so forth. But those operators that understand the need to be able to take on these services and to diversify and not be reliant on one stream of revenue and have that capacity, have been extremely successful in cases that we've seen across the country. And with my own experience over the last year and a bit doing this, so.
Okay. Sylvain, in your experience, your 6 years, Zakari said he's seen it happen in 1 year with Fixed Network. What have you seen happen in instances where people are adding services?
I think we need to go back and understand what we're doing overall, as we're providing a service, an essential service, by the way, to consumer. And we need to make sure that we do it in the most efficient way. So just from the get-go, the fact that you are getting ready to offer additional services like calibration and all, you reduce in cycle time. Cycle time is money. It's money for you. It's money for any stakeholders that come to you. So from the get-go, we need to think about the service that we provide to consumers first. So by adding that service, by eliminating, and again, I don't want to say eliminate it, because that the intent is not to eliminate sublet completely, but as much as possible to ameliorate cycle time. So if you have a better cycle time, you are more revenue, you generate more revenue through your store. So from the get-go, you can only see a win. If you are improving customer service, whether you're dealing with an insurance DRP or you're dealing directly with consumer, if you are getting better at your cycle time, then it's better customer service, then obviously you will get more volume, right? You will be and on top of it, when you look at the new generation coming in, the new generation doesn't want to call anybody. They don't want to talk to anybody. So the fact that you have access to a car currently, imagine if what we're seeing that works a whole lot is that you have a car inside for an accident. At the same time, you do an estimate for the windshield that is cracked. You make sure that you have all your calibration lined up and all, so you can definitely communicate with your customer. And Zak's going to talk to that a little bit more, to give them a quote on, while we have your car, you can do all of this. By doing all of this, again, you provide a better service for your customer. And by doing that, you increase throughput to your store. So I think we need to think there's a need for calibration and to add, but you need to look at it from a customer service standpoint. The better you are, the better you ameliorate your cycle time, the more business you're going to drive to your doors.
Mm-hmm. That one-stop shop that's really good at getting the car in and out in perfect condition, or pre-accident condition. We can't say perfect.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to get that question off the table because I know that's what a lot of people are listening to hear, perspectives on that. But taking it back to the challenges that you mentioned, all of these different facets that we're facing as an automotive industry as a whole, what do you two see as key opportunities that collision centers can seize to address these challenges? So, Sylvain, we'll start with you. What do you think collision centers should do if they want to survive and thrive in the future? What do they have to do right now? What's your advice there?
Well, you need to look at what your competitor is doing and do it better, right? I think for many years, unfortunately, with COVID that hit us, I think that the majority of there's a lot of operators that forgot about the fact that yeah, we're in a competing business and we need to you need to beat your competitor in your market. So I think it's imperative that we understand the need of the customers that are coming to us, whether again it's a consumer or an insurance company. And if we don't do it better, somebody will pass us, right? Status quo, unfortunately, is not sustainable. So we always need to differentiate ourselves. It's amazing when you get a chance to travel across the country, see the difference in what people do to differentiate themselves from a customer service standpoint, right? At the end of the day, this is what we do. We generate a service, and we need to differentiate ourselves to make sure that we stay on top of the curve. So if you don't do everything that we're talking about, because we're talking about the shop of the future, but we got to be real. It is the shop of today. There's what we're talking about today. Many people are already doing it. So if you're not doing it today, think about it. You already have somebody in your market that's ahead of you, which is in times where, like currently, like when it's quiet a little bit, I hate to say it, but you're already losing some opportunities that will generate additional revenue and everything else. So I think we need to look at not only what it can generate more, but what we're losing if we're not doing it today.
For sure. And do you have anything to add to that there, Zach?
Yeah, I think from the traditional mechanical aftermarket side, we always talk about that battle with the OE dealer, right? That's always the conversation is, the dealer's getting back the customer. The customer is more informed today, the general consumer, with the internet and all the availability and access to information for them to better understand their own cars, right? So when we look at it from a network perspective, my number one focus when we talk about the shop of the future, and we talk about, and as Sylvain mentioned on that customer experience, is that, we need to put ourselves in the customer's shoes, in the shoes of the consumer, and make sure that as a network, our number one priority is to improve that customer experience, and to make sure that we're providing that as a network to be able to, to support that ecosystem and provide people the knowledge, tools, and understanding to be able to effectively adapt to what Sylvain mentioned, the shop of today, right? And I think, from my experience over the last year and a bit doing this, and that's the number one, mission that we need to do to prepare, our collision owners as a network, is to understand, how do we effectively keep that customer? How do we manage those processes that they don't have to go back to the dealer on that mechanical and glass side? And how do we provide them a great customer experience, if they are at that collision repair facility from a alternative service perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Providing that exceptional, like we said before, that exceptional customer service experience every time. And you really can't afford to make mistakes in the industry that we're in. It's not only detrimental, and it's also just it's a recipe for disaster. When someone's already in a collision, you don't want to then make them upset because you've done something else with their vehicle. And providing those exceptional services and becoming the shop of today, which we've just changed the name of the webinar, if you're paying attention, breaking news. So moving on from what we've just talked about in this first section here, a lot of people that are listening, another question that I'd like to address for the masses, they might feel like adding another service is just increasing your workload, like as you said, not eliminating, but sort of switching from sublet into doing things in-house, or at least under the same company banner. You need staff, equipment, training, just to start off with, the basic things that are off the top of the head. How do you two suggest that a facility manage integrating another service without adding stress to their workload? Zach, we'll start with you.
Yeah, having owned a business, anytime an entrepreneur is going to be taking on an additional part of their business, there's definitely going to be some stress to it, right? It's not completely stress-free. I think it's about managing, like we said, the changing dynamics of the industry and how they prepare themselves for those changes within the scope of their business, right? So I don't think it's completely stress-free. Nothing's completely stress-free, but it's just how do you prepare yourself in the tide of changing environment. So that's kind of my comment to it. I think that diversifying services is getting easier with different technology and different accessibility to training and so on and so forth. So, but I do think, and Sylvain will touch on it a little bit, relying on one service, especially with all that consumer information that's out there, and as I mentioned, the internet, it could be potentially a recipe for disaster, if things change rapidly. So, having that access to own the consumer, that the consumer knows, that you do all services and they come back to you for, oil changes and brakes and glass service, it protects you, from, if claims goes down because technology increases dramatically, right? So having that interaction and that reputation with the customer for an encompassing service, I think it's so important as things change, right?
100%. Yeah, totally
Right.
agree. And Sylvain, can you add to that your perspective
Yep,
as well?
I'll add to that. And again, I think we need to differentiate retail business from the typical work required when you do collision, right? Sublet, that includes mechanical. 80% of the vehicle that we fix will require some type of mechanical. So if you don't have it on site, you need to sublet. As I said earlier, if you sublet, it's cycle time that you're adding in all of this. Again, calibration today, you're not adding an additional service. It's a service that is required every time you fix a car. So again, not everybody will be able to add calibration into their own facility. It requires square foot. It does take place, right? So you basically in an industry where we're lacking of capacity, you don't want to take a stall that can generate that much revenue from the collision side to if you don't have the room to grow or additional room to put calibration. So you need to do the math. You need to make sure that it makes sense, but you need to plan for it because ultimately you will have. Sorry, something's happening on my laptop here. You will definitely have to go through that calibration and that mechanical work that you sublet. Now, having said that, the retail business is a little different. Adding that retail business, I think, requires some additional training, some coaching, and it's a different mindset. In the collision industry, where there's a lot of volume that's directed to you via DRP's agreement and all, it's very different than retail, where you actually have to sell a service and literally go after the customer and try to sell why they need to do it. And also it is different. You need to attack it with a different mindset. But like I said, anything related to collision that requires sublet today, anybody that can do it, make it in-house, saves a lot of time.
And that pretty much brings us into our next question and our next section, talking about the investment aspect really perfectly. So thanks for that setup there, Sylvain. You mentioned that calibration takes a lot of space. It takes level floors. It takes training, takes equipment. Same thing for adding even retail services through mechanical, through anything. Any service is going to require a different learning curve, of course. So how do you two suggest that shops manage the added requirements like training, upskilling, acquiring equipment, knowledge for new services? Where can they train, or where can their technicians train and acquire the required knowledge? Kind of made a tongue twister for myself there. Acquire the required knowledge for adding new services. Where can they get these services? Where can they consider them? Like, where do you even start if you're taking on this big new task? Sylvain, can you start?
Well, again, there's many places. First of all, as soon as you buy, you understand that you need to buy some equipment and all. There's definitely training. All of these companies are well equipped to train you. It's highly important that you educate yourself, you make the right choice, and when you do partner up with a company, that you go through the entire training. I see too many equipment standing still in a shop that it's not being utilized. That's a huge loss of revenue, in my opinion, because not only you're not utilizing the equipment, but you're losing the space. So you definitely can do that. Now there's many, like we provide a lot of training. I mean, our boss invested highly in training center across the country. So of course we do that. So you need to go to the partners that you work with and find out what type of training, what type of education they can give you, to make sure that you have everything that you need. And any suppliers that you deal with will provide you with training. So again, training is out there, is making sure that you invest in that training. And we hear a whole lot about people that are saying, what if I invest in training and I lose the technician? What if you don't and you lose them, right? We've all heard that before. So specifically today, with new technology, and the complexity of fixing the cars of today, training is highly important, and it is available. You need to invest in that training.
Do you have anything to add there, Zachary, or just sort of
Yeah.
reiterate?
Yeah, just to compartmentalize, if we look, glass is very different than mechanical. Mechanical, there's such a wide array of services. And skilled technicians have a certification with the government where they go in, they get their apprenticeship, they get their Red Seal certification. So adding a service and upskilling a mechanical technician, even though there is a massive labor shortage, it's a different dynamic than within the glass business if you're diversifying and adding glass and calibration to your business. So to speak to Sylvain point, into what you're asking, within our Novus business, we have so much knowledge. We have these training centers. We have manufacturing. We have all the tools for someone to be able to come to us and say, hey, we want to get into the glass and calibration business. How do we do it? And we provide weeks and weeks of training. We'll provide all the equipment that's required. We work with partner companies to be able to recommend calibration units and training for those calibration units and so on and so forth. So from the glass side, we can take it from A to B, from the start to the finish line, in a period of time to be able to get into that, either eliminating your sublet or adding that full facing retail business, within the scope of glass and calibration. Mechanical is much different. As I mentioned, it's, but yeah, definitely it's, two different scopes, but again, very similar, situation with our mechanical business too, and with how we help partner and recommend equipment and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the gist is it's like Sylvain said, it's out there. It's just a matter of knowing where to look and, talking to the right suppliers you get your equipment from. They're always going to provide training. They're not going to leave you with a good supplier that's well known in the industry. They're not going to leave you high and dry with no training and force you to keep your tool in the corner and make Sylvain mad when he sees the tool's not getting used. But so we touched. Yeah, I like you said, Zach. I mean, it's completely different scope. Like looking at glass, it's obviously going to be completely different fixing a windshield than fixing an engine or intake or something. So looking to where the expertise is and not being afraid to ask for help, really, and utilizing those resources, as you two mentioned, the fixed network training centers, the training centers in the industry that are available to learn these techniques that are required. And Novus is also a training program that Zach says can take you from point A to point Z in a matter of weeks. So that's pretty awesome to know that the training's out there. I mean, you all know that you're not alone. So kind of folding back into the customer service aspect, I know we've touched on this a little bit already. Did say at the beginning, we all know consumer behaviors are changing. Customers know more about their vehicles and care more about their vehicles than they have in according to studies in recent past. And I mean, personally speaking, I care more about my car if there's going to be more things on it that if 1 millimeter is off, it's going to send me flying into the wrong lane. So juggling several different verticals and different operations under one business, it can be challenging to provide that exemplary customer service experience every single time. So Zach, starting with you, how do you think automotive businesses can manage more than one service underneath their banner, while also providing that exceptional customer experience? I mean, we've touched on the one-stop shop. So how do they really capitalize and make their customers understand, like, look how much we can do for you. We're great. What's your opinion there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a two-pronged question because again, the businesses, while similar, are different, and there's required training from each division of the business that needs to be trained on the different aspects of those verticals, right? From a network perspective, we're investing heavily in digital and transforming that customer experience. So what we can do with our shops and what we do today is we're providing them a new ability to be able to communicate with customers, outreach to customers, text message, email campaigns, so on and so forth, to make it easier in terms of those different communication channels, right? And that's for our glass and our mechanical business. And speaking to that, when you're keeping it all in-house, you're having the right digital platforms to be able to communicate with the customers. You have the right footprint, you have the right setup internally, that it's not confusing for customers. That's really what we're doing as a network to compartmentalize, have the right training, have the right technology, have the right marketing, and skills to be able to effectively communicate with customers throughout the process, right?
And it's almost like, I mean, to your point of having everything all under one roof, under one house operation, like you kind of have an opportunity to control the experience more. You do have an opportunity to control the experience more than if you were using a sublet that perhaps you don't 100% trust. It's a new sublet. You don't know how they're going to act with your customers, and you're very protective. So good point there, Zach. Sylvain, how do you suggest that collision centers, perhaps in specific, operate, make sure that they're providing that exemplary customer service every single time while operating multiple different parts of the customer's vehicle?
Well, I think I go and I follow in Zach with Zach's direction when we're talking about who we're dealing with today. And I keep telling the example of my daughter that was into an accident in February. There was an estimate written. Unfortunately, the bumper was back order. It's on a Mazda, not to name anybody, but the bumper was back ordered for a certain period of time. And my daughter went back to her dealer at some point for an oil change, and that dealer very quickly made sure that they write an estimate for her car. They told her when they could take the car in, and her windshield was cracked, and they also sent her everything by text, as Zach was saying. And my daughter was pretty impressed, and she loved it, right? So I think this is the future, right? Well, the future, it's today. I keep saying it's the future, but it is today. So look at the younger generation. They don't want to talk to anybody. So at the end of the day, the better service you can give them, the better the easier you can make it for them. It has a price, right? It's not always about price. You have a certain kind of customer that will negotiate on pricing, but if you can understand what the customer that you're, or the, even from a collision standpoint, if you can understand what makes what makes the life easy of the customer that you're in, and you provide all these services, obviously you'll be surprised to see the amount of additional sales that are done to each vehicle to somebody that has the right mindset of making sure that while the car is in for a collision, they provide a list or a quote of everything that they can do above and beyond while they have their cars on hands, and people appreciate it. It's rarely, when you think about it, it's all done at the same time. So it's a whole lot easier for them. So
It's just about communicating it in the right way. Like you said, the people that are dedicated to it and know how to do it properly, they really reap the rewards.
Yeah, it's speaking to Sylvain's point, like we've added many glass businesses within mechanical businesses throughout the year. And in those examples, the feedback that we've got in those cases is that the customers were going elsewhere for their glass service, but a glass service and a calibration service, the customer doesn't know the difference between that collision shop, the glass shop, or the mechanical shop. They just know when they hear, sorry, we don't do that, or they don't, or they leave with a broken windshield, they just go somewhere else where they can get it done. But to speak to Sylvain's point about his daughter, is that the customers are looking for that. That's their expectation, is that they don't really understand the difference between the collision shop, the mechanical shop, and the glass shop. So why don't you provide that exemplary customer service where they leave with a great experience, even if you're not going to sell all that work in that exact, when that car leaves for that collision claim, you're not going to get brakes, or you're not going to get, a full replacement on the windshield. At least you've had that conversation, that you're preparing that customer for safety, that they're not just leaving there with something else wrong with their vehicle. Because you hear a lot of the time that the customer leaves and they come back, they say, oh, I got in a collision and my brakes were squeaking or something like that. Well, why don't we have a digital vehicle report that told them, what condition that their brakes are in terms of that, that process, right? So, speaking to Sylvain's point, it's important. Consumers are looking for it. And when you do it, there is incredible feedback to, from the consumers, and owning that customer, not just as a claim, but as a customer of your center.
And to that point there too, Zach, it could be the difference between, a 4-star and a 5-star Google review. 4 stars, oh, they fixed everything, but they couldn't fix my windshield for some reason. And it's a collision shop or a mechanical shop that just doesn't have that service because, like you said, they don't understand the difference here.
And it's crazy too. It's like, a lot of these vehicles from a collision shop that has, glass, or a mechanical shop has glass, if they leave there with a crack in their windshield, a lot of conversations that I've had with, with owners through the process, they say, oh, we're not including chips or cracks as part of a inspection process. And it's like, these are the conversations that lead to, aha points to say, hey, this is a customer experience, right?
Perfect. We focused a lot on that section there, so we're gonna go through a couple of our last questions here, but be sure to keep asking your questions. We've got a couple of questions already. When we get to Q&A, we'll get through them. But emerging technologies, obviously a huge topic of conversation in the industry, whether it be ADAS, like we've discussed here today, or EVs, which we've touched on a little bit. But what impact do these emerging technologies like ADAS or EVs play on the industry? Sylvain, we'll start with you here. How does this impact, like you mentioned, the ADAS impact? Obviously, collision is almost always a calibration nowadays. But what opportunities or challenges are they presenting to the industry for collision centers?
Well, I think when we're talking about the ADAS, right, advanced driving assistance, at the end of the day, I don't think that we've seen the impact yet, right? There's a lot of things that happen in the industry over the last couple of years that made it that we're always talking about capacity being an issue, capacity. Well, there's not a whole lot of place in the country right now that capacity is an issue. Everybody has issue. Are we seeing finally the impact of advanced driving assistance? I believe so, right? So at the end of the day, this is where the shift needs to happen. And again, it should have happened before, but we didn't focus on that before because, of course, the collision shops were full. But now today, understanding that there's a chance that the number of accidents will be impacted by all of that driving assistance, then it's imperative that you maximize the revenue on every vehicle. I'm looking at it today and I'm seeing where some owners have a hard time making, having their technicians working all week and all. But think about it. If you add glass and you start trying to sell the crack repair and everything else, you can train a few technicians by doing it. And on top of it, if you add mechanical, well, then you generate additional revenue. So I think the challenge is to, some people are doing it today, right? So the challenge is to adapt and make sure that you capitalize on every opportunities that you have. And yes, of course, it will require additional investment, additional training to stay on top of the game. But today, like I said, as soon as we're talking about calibration and all. It's not additional training. It's investment. It's necessary investment to stay on top of what you need to do in order to be collision repair. So that's a long answer
Absolutely.
for a short question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a short question, and it deserves a long answer. I mean, there's a lot of people that are struggling with whether or not to take on these services right now. So, I mean, Zakari, as our glass expert here right now, what's your sorry, what's your opinion on the emerging impact of ADAS and EVs, whether it be an opportunity, some challenges that are there? What do you see facing the aftermarket right now as we stare EVs and ADAS down?
Yeah, my biggest, I'll back it up, right? We recently did some training. We went down to the US and we spent a couple of days with one of our partners, and we did some training on ADAS in a massive trading center, and we were going through the impact of electric vehicles and the scope of the industry and State of the Union and so on and so forth. And the biggest thing that I see, call it as an opportunity and a challenge, is that the lines are being blurred between mechanical and calibration. We talk about alignment, levels of alignment, levels of ADAS, and all the different safety systems that are going together. And my biggest takeaway for collision repair shops is that we need to start thinking about the blurred line of those services and how that impacts the collision repair industry. That, to get technical, we look at thrust angles with alignment for a vehicle to be centered, right? We can't technically start a calibration on a vehicle unless an alignment is done before, and we know that the vehicle is going to go straight, because you have to essentially reset a camera back to center and have the vehicle follow, from a chassis perspective, follow that same line, right? So from a collision perspective, you need to be understanding those impacts in terms of, call it, space and investment, and how you can do things in an efficient and effective manner within the collision repair shop to be able to capitalize and manage those changes in those services, right? So when we talk about the shop of the future, we talk about, okay, how can you now be able to manage those services, and how do you do that within that space confined with these changes? So there is some incredible technology that's coming out that's going to make it easier for collision repair shops, but like to Sylvain's point, they need to be open-minded to understand those changes. There is investment, and how are you going to be able to take that on to be able to effectively manage these repairs moving forward? So again, a long answer to a short question.
Like I said, it's a short question. I just worded it short, but it's just a very long question. I mean, EVs and ADAS, put those two together, that's like two of the three biggest things that we're facing right now as an industry. So we're gonna move on to Q&A here in a moment. Just gonna end off on one question here. So be sure to get your answers or questions in the Q&A, and we'll give the answers whenever we get there. But ending with kind of a big question that we started on as well. The challenges that you've seen shops face in integrating new services. So Zach, you mentioned you've seen plenty mechanical shops take on glass this year. Sylvain, you've undoubtedly seen a lot of different collision centers take on new business ventures in your 6 years with Fix and beyond in your time in the industry. So what are the two challenges, or some of the top what are the top challenges that you guys have seen when businesses are adding new services, and what's your advice to help other players avoid these? So Zach, starting with you, what challenges have you witnessed shops face, and how have they sort of hurdled around them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in today's environment is that space is a premium everywhere. So understanding, it's not easy for every collision repair shop to take on additional services, because a lot of them, metro markets, very urban areas, Vancouver, Toronto, it's hard to find space, right? So I think that's the biggest thing that you need to understand. Do you have the capacity in the space to be able to add those services? And if you do, it comes with discipline. I think discipline is the biggest thing from, an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur, the amount of discipline that you need to be able to effectively manage change and to do it. It's tough, but when you do it, there's massive payoffs to be able to, as Sylvain mentioned, you outperform your competition and, you provide a great customer experience. So I think that's the two things for me is, do you have the capacity and space to be able to do so? And, do you have the entrepreneurial discipline to be able to execute? So
yeah, don't bite off more than you can chew in business terms, basically. Sylvain, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Zach.
Yeah, no, there's great entrepreneurs. So, great entrepreneurs with great entrepreneurial spirit will, are able to accomplish great things. So
absolutely. And we know we have plenty of those in our industry. Sylvain, your experience in watching shops take on new experiences, new ventures, what challenges have you seen and what's your advice to help people avoid or, make proper decisions when they're considering what we've discussed here on the webinar today?
So if I speak from a collision standpoint, more than anything else, I think the mindset is very important. Yes, I agree with Zach. Capacity is an issue. You need to do your due diligence to understand if it's feasible for you from a financial standpoint and all. And if you don't, then you need to have a plan, right? Because there's definitely a need. And like I said, the cycle time reduction should be on top of priority today if you want to stay on top of the game. But having said that, I think that the biggest challenge that I see from a collision standpoint is to attack retail business with the same mentality. You need training. You need to understand that you need to sell your services from A to Z to get buy-in and to be so. Unfortunately there's a lot of people that will get another service on board, whether it's glass, we've seen a lot with glass, and mechanical, with the same mindset that they have on the collision side. It's two separate business. It doesn't mean, I hate to say it, but you need to be a salesperson in order to sell retail. You need to understand the retail business. And it doesn't mean that you've been in the collision world for many years, that you understand how to ask the right questions, understand the customer's needs to deliver a service that will satisfy that needs. So there's a lot of training available. It's very important, but again, it's two different mindsets. And if you think because there's an old saying that said, "What got you here won't get you there." You may be very successful in the collision world, but you need to adapt to the retail business in order to be successful. But once you do, and once you combine both, I see a lot of success story come out of it. So.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, those are all the questions we had laid out for this session. So we'll kind of move into Q&A now. But first, I want to say thank you to Sylvain. Thank you, Zakari, for your insights here. I think a lot of us, we stayed pretty much around a stable viewership the whole time, but we'll move into Q&A. I think the first question that we have here submitted through email, I got an email here, said, if I want to add ADAS or glass services, how many staff should I have trained? What about if I want to add mechanical? How many people will I need to hire? In your perspectives, do you think hiring, what have you seen work, not work? I guess it depends on the scale, really.
Zach, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I'll tackle that. So from the the recent stores that we put online on the glass side of the business, generally to start, you want to have one person to do your glass and calibration. And within the collision repair center, it's not effective that person is going to be the person that comes out of the body repair process. And again, to Sylvain's point, there's a massive need for capacity within the industry. It is absolutely not effective to use a body person and take them out of the repair process in the collision repair center. So what we see is one person. There's great training. The technology is getting easier to use on both the glass and on the calibration side. In combination together, one person to start within a general collision repair center should be more than effective to manage. And what we've seen, from a customer service perspective, about 0.5 of a person as you get ramped up. You can cross train a person, that's at the front desk of of your collision repair center to greet that customer and to deal with the different technologies in terms of those point of sale systems. So I would say to start about 1.5 people to get into a diversified glass business. Mechanical, obviously, the scope of mechanical is so much, bigger, different services, and so on and so forth. So it's a little different to speak on the mechanical side, but glass definitely about one technician and 0.5 of a customer service person to start.
Okay, perfect. Kind of adding to that question is another one here. This person's asking, can I add some glass services to see how things fare before I dive fully into, glass and ADAS calibration? For instance, should I start with chip repair or just dive right in and do it all?
Well, I'll say that, and I think I've been pretty vocal about it since the beginning. I think calibration is a must. I think if you're in the collision, because your question was that if I'm in collision, should I add glass, chip repair, or mechanical and all? Calibration is the first thing you need to add. If you can't add it on your site, because of constraint in square footage and all, then you need to have a good plan for it, right? So I would say this, and then yeah. So first thing, calibration, then glass, in my opinion, that makes sense. And finally at the end, because again, mechanical, just like and I was happy that Zach mentioned that it's imperative that we don't touch our skills technicians that are working on the collision and even on the mechanical, because it is a skills trade, right? To get them trained to do something else. It's counterproductive to remove someone, unless, of course, the technician wants to learn something else and do something else, of course. But I think it's imperative that we keep our skills technician at what they are trained to be skilled at, and because capacity is a big issue. But calibration.
For sure.
First.
Building on Sylvain's point too, that I have seen some collision shops that are doing mechanical repair internally. They also have a small retail component of it, and they're not touching glass and calibration today. And the only thing I'd like to add is that on the mechanical side, we're like a skilled technician is using an Autel tablet or whatever type of scan tool that you're using for diagnostics today. So that skilled technician within the mechanical center, they're already using that diagnostic technology. Adding an ADAS to the process is a natural progression because they're doing diagnostic work already, right? So it's a bit different than the collision repair process, where that's at the end of the repair process, they need to manage that calibration. It's already quasi-integrated on the mechanical side. So it's a bit of a natural progression that a good mechanical diagnostic tech can be the person that takes on the calibration. And again, you don't want your good mechanical diagnostic tech starting to rip out windshields. That's a different skill set. But we are seeing on the retail side a very, very nice natural progression that you get a good diagnostic tech, they manage the calibration, and obviously you have someone else in the shop that manages glass. We can train them, you hire them as an experienced glass tech, but it needs to be generally a person that's hired for that. So.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question there. Ted here in Zoom wants to know, what would you say are the top services that could be added that will reduce cycle times the most? If you could clarify, Ted, if you're a collision center, mechanical center, what kind of business you are, but say they're a collision center. Oh, he raised his hand here. If we could clarify what top services could be added to a business that, in your experience, help reduce cycle times the most?
Well, I think I feel like I'm repeating myself, but from a collision standpoint,
sorry, he's a supplier.
Definitely calibration.
Calibration, okay.
Definitely calibration. 100% of the vehicle we'll be fixing next year will require calibration.
Perfect. So calibration, adding that service can really help you to hone in, being specialized in that service can help you to hone in and provide that best. Suad Duale, she's from Tropicana Community Services, asking here, want to ask, in your experience, how do you attract new apprentices? So could you two speak to maybe the EV and ADAS cool factor, or, how can a shop that offers diversified services really sell that to an apprentice and be like, you want to work here? You think that that's like a viable way that shops can market themselves as like a...
So
Sorry?
Speaking from the corporate locations that we have, there's a big skilled trades shortage out there. On the collision side as well, massive skilled trade shortage. Both sides, the entire industry. So, in my experience and having the corporate jobs now is that we've been investing heavily into equipment, into training for the technicians, that we want to be the absolute best facilities, because we want to attract the best technicians, right? And the best technicians in this environment, they can pick and choose where they want to be. They don't want to be at Bob's garage where they're working on a 1970s alignment machine. They want to be with the Cadillac of equipment, with the best training, the best benefits, and so on and so forth. So, I think as a network, we need to do our job in making sure we support our ecosystem, in investing and making sure that people understand that how important that is at the technician level, to be able to retain and attract top level talent. So.
Mhm. We do have a bit of a comment here. I won't read the full comment. It's a bit long here, but if you guys can see it, basically the gist is this person saying that they're saying that shops should look into investing in mechanical first, as the vehicle needs to be mechanically sound prior to calibration. I believe we touched on the alignment part of that and how everything just kind of fits in nicely together. But they said this also might pose billable challenges, especially for people that are part of a banner or DRP arrangement. So do you guys have any experience dealing with that? A struggle for backtracking if you're sending the car back to mechanical and then bringing it back for collision. Do you experience any of that in your shops that have this kind of setup?
You mean, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah.
So if you're, and again, I think there's a lot of, I'm not sure if I get it right, but what he's saying is that the comment is that if you, let's say you own a separate business that's outside of your collision shop, you still need to send it and back, and that's
I think
creating a challenge.
I think they're saying if you're doing calibrations in-house, regardless, you'd have to send the vehicle to a mechanic prior to a calibration, is what their understanding is. They're saying that sending that to a separate third-party mechanical, if you are someone investing in calibration first, might introduce some sort of hiccups along the way. I think that's what they're saying.
I I hear you, but I think and Zach can probably speak to that, but there's not, my understanding is that not every vehicle needs to be sent to a mechanic before. It needs to be aligned, yes, but not necessarily go. And there's a lot of equipment that do free alignment before and that you can do alignment with. So like I said,
That's your experience, yeah.
yeah.
The collision repair process is getting much more intuitive as well, that you'll pre-scan the vehicle, the inspection process with the vehicle. So if there's no mechanical work, or there's, no diagnostic, that the diagnostic comes back that it doesn't need an alignment or whatever the case may be, then not every vehicle is gonna have that challenge. But to speak to the point, we do have collision owners within our network that they don't have space capacity within a building, and there's successful examples that they've, somewhere close, they've added a separate retail business that, one, handles their sublet, and two, deals with retail facing customers. And I think that's a really great opportunity for the collision repairers to, one, you want to optimize your collision repair center. It's a manufacturing environment, per se, and every point of touch point of that vehicle within that collision repair center, you want to optimize your space, doing, like Sylvain mentioned, you want to optimize your cycle time and have the best flow through the facility. So eliminating those services where you don't have space and taking it out and having a separate business where you're able to to have more cycle time within the collision repair facility, as well as have retail, handle your own sublet. That's a really good recipe, and we have seen good successful examples of that being done across the country. So I don't know if that answers the question, but from my experience, and through Sylvain and my conversations, mixing retail and collision, that's a great recipe. That's a great recipe because you maximize your cycle time and your collision process, and and you still manage it in house and have retail.
Yeah. think we have time for one more quick question here from Mark Silverman. If we didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry. We can send them over to the team after, and maybe they can get some answers over to you. But Mark Silverman's asking, will a collision shop be able to sustain the cost of the skilled technicians required for what could be a limited amount of calibration and mechanical work? Basically, is there enough work to sustain the cost of hiring these technicians, like you said, Zakari? Do you two see enough calibration and mechanical work to be able to keep that afloat and still make money on top of hiring this extra person and the training?
Like I said, depending, again, you need to do the math, of course, depending on the size of your facility. But today there's more and more, there's business that specialize only in calibration. And there's people that are up to one and two people doing only calibration. Again, I think Zach mentioned that it's fun to cross-train some people. Again, calibration, in a lot of places there's people doing mechanical that they're trained to do the calibration, and also there's a way to cross train, but there's definitely, you need to do the math on how much calibration is necessary and what you need to do. And again, calibration today with all the steps, there's some calibration that still take a few hours, and when it's well documented and all, you get paid for it, and it is a viable part of your business. So
absolutely. All right. That's all the time we have. We've actually gone a minute over here today, but I want to say thank you so much, Sylvain. Thank you, Zakari, for your expertise. I think we had a really, really thorough conversation here today. For anyone that wants to share the webinar, we're going to have it out on our site tomorrow and on social media. But I want to say thank you again to Sylvain and Zakari for your thoughtful conversation here today.
Thank you, Allison.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you for everyone.
And everyone else, have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you next time on our Open Dialogue webinars.